I'm spitting game to the people who decide our fate. I'll make a name in history, be one of the greats. I've got the traits that you need to get past the gates. Man, I don't wait, I exceed every single day. A different breed, yeah, I put it on display. Got all I need, and it's up inside my brain. I will succeed, cause I tell myself that every day. Y'all will concede and remember the name. Shout out to Fort Minor, cause it's 50% pain. But that 5% of pleasure's why I'm still in the game. And I exceed every measure by hard work, I'll
All right. I think we might exist. Hold on. Oh wait, I'm on the wrong screen. There we go. All right. I think we're back here. So I am joined here on episode 2 of the Double Dargun podcast that I have not called this at all, but we have a Mr. Vash with us. Say something, Vash.
Hello.
What's
up?
All right, we do exist, so... All right there. So, essentially what we have currently for the title is basically, can the Democrats defeat Donald Trump, assuming they listened and theoretically did smart things, which I believe they can. It's just, it doesn't seem like we're going that way, and part of the inspiration, as we were discussing a little bit earlier, Vash, is, or maybe I didn't mention this to you, but essentially Mr. Timothy Poole, he did a little video, and apparently at the Democratic donor meeting / lunch / whatever, they were asking, so is there anyone else? And they were floating around names such as like Michelle Obama. Apparently they also had, Mayor Bloomberg, as well as even Secretary Clinton as well. They had mentioned, and I don't know, what does it say that we got to this part? And you actually turned me on to something, as we see on the Darguntron down there. When you Google Democratic people, the first thing that comes up under celebrity / Democratic Party is Donald Trump. Like, when you said that, I'm like, I think this is the crux of what's going on. And this is something that Andrew Yang said the other day. He's like, when we talk about President Trump, we're losing. It's like, if all you're going to do is basically say how bad this other person is, what are you running on? So, I don't know, Vash, what's going on here?
I mean, it seems that this is a meme in and of itself, first of all, because it seems that the Democratic Party has talked about Trump so much that that Google has decided to say, you know what, Trump's part of the Democratic Party.
Well, this is the thing. They've broken the algorithm. They've literally talked about the man so much that you just Google Democratic people, and first things first, you have President Trump come up, followed by President Obama, Vice President Biden, Secretary Clinton, freaking Cory Booker, and then Bill Clinton. So apparently this is what the internet thinks of when they hear Democratic people or party.
Well, I mean, I'm just wondering, like, you know those people that have Trump derangement syndrome?
It's Trump anxiety disorder. It's actually TAD.
So now it's Trump anxiety disorder. Okay. Well,
clinical diagnosis.
Yeah, but the whole thing about it is, can you just imagine someone Googling Democratic people, and the moment that Donald Trump's fucking face is there smiling at them, they just scream at their monitor?
I'm sure somewhere in the world that may or may not have happened already, because apparently during the inauguration, some folks weren't the biggest fan of what happened, and it just I think it struck many nerves. I mean, I could understand why, because if you're just basing it off of what a lot of times you just kind of see, like the headlines, and I mean, let's face it, I mean, talking about the president gets ratings and stuff, because you're like, what's going on? But I think we've reached the point of over-market saturation, to the point where just like your average Sally, Dick, or Jane, they're going, enough already. Are we in World War III? Are we throwing the guy out of office or not? Like, I don't know. Why are you there? Are you just there to just fight with each other? Because this is the point where it literally is. It's like, okay,
Well,
if we're.
man,
Go on.
Emilio Ocasio-Cortez is currently still crying about the Green New Deal, so
I believe it's
it's
Alexandria Ocasio Cortez, representative.
well, whatever her name is. I've personally just stopped paying attention to her that much.
I mean, it's. I get. No, she's very popular. She's inspired a lot of people and everything, and there's something to that. Do I agree with Representative Ocasio Cortez on every single issue? Of course not. But that's the thing. It's like she has a powerful mimetic. I know that Mr. Poole often refers to her as the anti-Trump, like the antithesis. I mean, in some ways, she kind of is. Um, I mean, but then again, President Trump has a long history of getting into proverbial shouting matches and arguments with large entities, threatening to sue, occasionally suing. I believe didn't he sue Bill Maher one time because he called him an orangutan? And since at that time Donald Trump said, "See, I have a birth certificate. I am not an orangutan." He tried to sue him for like $1 million. It's like,
Um, Trump sues Bill
it,
Maher.
I mean, this really like was a thing. So okay, okay. I gotta.
Trump sues Maher for $5 million for orangutan sex joke.
Yeah, yeah, he made a joke. So and I mean again, this is one of those things where it's like President of Trump and freedom of speech. It's like okay, he made a he made a joke. You can say it was a grossly offensive joke that Donald Trump likely took to that, but it's like it if you want to go after the guy, like you don't go after him by literally being like, oh, I'm gonna roll in the mud with him. I mean, Marco Rubio tried that when he's like, oh, look at the size of his hands, because he noticed he got like half a point bump for like a day and a half in the polls, and it's like, dude, you're an elected senator from Florida. What are you doing? Like, that's the thing. People start acting out of their normal character and people pick up on that. Like that's my thought on this. I'm just like, what are you guys doing? It's like he keeps putting bait out there. He just keeps on like saying all like this random stuff on Twitter knowing it's going to like trigger you and you're going to go after him and it's just like yeah, I don't know. I don't know. Is he an absolute buffoon or is he like some mastermind colluding genius or something like that? It's
Well,
like that's the thing. It's like if you call him one thing one day and then call him the next like 2 minutes later, it's like, come on, people pick up on that. Go on, Vash.
I mean, you have to look at it as everybody knows Vincent McMahon, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, you would know that Trump and McMahon are pretty fucking close,
Yeah.
and he had he's used the same technique that that wrestling has for the heel,
Yeah.
and he's doing fucking amazing at it.
That's the thing. He's playing a better Mr. McMahon than Mr. McMahon.
Yeah, I mean that's basically all he's doing now. The whole deal. All right, Bernie going into this right now, he's not going to be able to win it. Now, like last election, I would have said that he would have posed a huge challenge against Trump, but this time, not really. Um, like I guess he's lost some of his drive. I'm not sure. Yang, I personally look at Yang and I'm like, well, he would be actually able to go toe to toe against Trump for a little while. But is that the one that we want? I'm not sure. I can, however, say that he would be able to go up against Trump. And then there's a female that I can't remember her name
Representative
that I
Tulsi
saw.
Gabbard.
There was Gabbard, and then there was another one that the
Senator
Democrats.
Kamala Harris.
Yeah, the one that they're not pushing towards and didn't get really that much airtime during the Democratic debate. Um, because I saw her, she was shutting shit the fuck down, and then they would just like go to a different person, and I'm like, you see, that's a person that could do it.
Are you what? Because I know
It was the second day.
the second day, I believe that was. I believe that you're speaking of Representative Tulsi Gabbard. She's the one from Hawaii. Um, I I don't know. I need a little bit more context than that because she kind of just almost torpedoed a lot of Kamala Harris's thing because she basically pointed out that when Senator Harris was, I believe, the AG of California over there, that she basically ended up denying some folks, like literally having evidence come in because apparently they were, because we still have prison labor because the United States, we still do have slavery on the books under the 13th Amendment there, because if you're convicted of a crime, like slave labor is still a thing. So that's why I'm like, we drastically need to increase the restrictions on slavery within these United States. So,
Yeah,
oh,
well, I mean,
go on.
the whole aspect of that. I mean, I personally am not for-profit prisons. I
Yeah, I'm not really the biggest fan of them either there. It's just like I've heard conflicting things that from at least one individual who's worked within a oh, Vash, I think you're back. Your mic cut out for a
Yeah,
second. I was just filling there. Go on.
yeah, sorry about that.
No worries.
But yeah, I'm personally not for-profit prisons. I don't necessarily like the aspect of that because for one, that's taking all right. One, let's say Victoria's Secret back whenever it was in a prison. All right, we all know how much Victoria's Secret clothing is, right?
What? What? Hold on a second. There was a Victoria's Secret in a prison.
Yeah, people in prison were making Victoria's Secret clothing.
What?
Yes, it's a thing.
Okay, that makes a little bit more sense than there being a Victoria's Secret in the prison, because I know, like, in some airports, they'd actually have, like, the little, like duty-free shops and stuff. Okay, that makes... What?
And hail Tim Tarbox, how you doing, buddy? But yeah, it is a thing.
Hmm.
Like they were making lingerie, and how much does that lingerie usually cost? Like shot in the dark memes, what, 150,
It's more than Target in general.
200,
Oh,
$300?
a good bit, a good bit, a good bit. Huh.
Well, we'll just say a few bins, right?
So it was
Few
made in
bins.
the USA using slave labor.
Yeah, yeah, but let's just say that corset is roughly we'll just say $200. Okay.
Okay.
Now, how much is that prisoner getting paid per hour? 10
Um,
cents.
less than minimum wage.
10 cents.
A lot less than minimum wage.
Maybe 30 cents.
Yeah.
So
Hashtag capitalism.
so we get one person that's working his ass off out of prison for 30 cents an hour.
No, 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 Tim. Here's the thing. I'm not necessarily an expert per se. I mean, I can respect products offered and everything because they. Wait, what? Sorry. Um. So that's very interesting. Just because it's like you hear about this stuff, and the sheer fact that I'm like, I wonder why I haven't heard of this before, because that just sounds like one of those stories where it's like, oh, these are two things that you do not associate together. It's like high-end mall lingerie and prison sweatshop labor. It's I but if it is legal, which I mean as far as I know it is, I mean, yeah, I mean again, it was still made here in the United States, but under what many would consider atrocious conditions. And that's the thing that just gets me. Go on.
High end jobs in prisons will get them around 50 cents to $1 per hour. And that's like an example of a high end job would be delivering milk to the rest of the prisons that are neighboring. So, some prisoners are actually trusted with keys to drive a milk truck to another prison and deliver.
Well, I mean, again, like that's the whole thing with like prison reform and everything. I think there's so many different things we can do, and we also need to kind of let's face it, man. A lot of times, if somebody's getting locked up for something, it does go along a very sliding scale. And I'm not even going to cite any real world things right here, though I probably should. But just look at Con Air, man. You look at this, it's like, all right, you got one dude, he's in prison. Why? He killed a dude. Okay. But Nick Cage, he killed a dude while defending his pregnant wife, which is something that, yes, while it might be illegal, a lot of folks kind of get the justification. However, he was, I believe, a Marine or Special Forces or something, and he had like full training. So whatever happened, he was in there versus Cyrus the Virus, who was basically just a mass murderer. So,
Yeah. I still think that that actor who played Cyrus also played as the character for Command and Conquer, the Brotherhood of Nod.
did, did he?
I don't know. I've always thought that though.
I mean, it could be. I think IMDb is a thing, but I don't care that much. All I know is I'm staring at my Google result for Democratic people and just looking at Donald Trump right now. This is the thing. It's like you've literally broken the internet, and it's like I think a lot. They say a lot of times you have a paradigm shift, and it's I kind of view it as like the big old like quote unquote grandfather clock where the thing is just going back and forth, the pendulum is swinging, and I feel like with President Obama, we started swinging back from like a lot of the stuff under President Bush. I'm just getting a little feedback, but uh, we zoom back a bit, and then we hit President Obama, and then we got President Trump, but the pendulum is like a lot of folks are just pushing back. So, but that's all I'm seeing here, man.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you can move your speaker away from your mic a little bit.
Oh, am I echoing?
Yeah,
Yeah, sorry about that.
no worries. But no, my big thing here is I'm just looking at this and I'm like, okay, so what the heck is going on? Still a little bit of feedback. And
Oh
I
yeah,
just
yeah.
and I just
I'm
think
working.
that if we could stop talking like Andrew Yang was saying and actually focus on actual stuff and things, I'm not sure if you have a headset, Vash. I'm sorry, but
I know it's messing with me. Just give me
oh,
just
no
a
worries,
second.
no worries, I got you.
I'll
But
work.
yeah, no, my big thing here is I'm just looking at this and I'm like, okay, well, just talk about issues and stuff. And it's like, okay, if you have all the Democratic candidates going out there and they're just when it gets to the point where it was at ABC, it's like raise your hands if you believe in this, and it's like everyone starts raising their hands, and then they later announce it's like we're no longer going to poll candidates and ask them to raise their hands. Why? Because they're afraid of just folks going along with the group. Is this what's going on? Are you afraid that if someone raises their hand, I don't want to be the person that doesn't raise my hand? It's like no, you're supposed to differentiate yourself, but you're also not necessarily supposed to lead the candidate per se or lead the witness in the court setting. It's like when Anderson Cooper is saying it's like allegations that have been made without evidence and stuff like that, or they've been disproven or stuff like that. Is okay, you're making a statement. You're already leading there. It's like, why couldn't you just be like Vice President Biden? There have been some questions about your son's relationship on the board of trustees on this Ukrainian firm. What were your thoughts? What would you have the American people know? That's all you got to do. Just ask a question that's actually relevant to people. He can give his response, and you move on. That's the thing. It's like folks are just trying to like wiggle their way into all these little boxes, trying to be like, I don't know. I might not be that particular puzzle piece, but if I do that, I'm gonna finish the crown and this underwater aquarium here. Yes, and it's like, what are you doing? It's like, are you doing that just to score some like candidate points or internet virtue points to monetize later or to try to like use for a future campaign? Now we know folks have done this for a while, because do I really think that Newt Gingrich last time around or the time before, he was really believing I am going to become the president of the United States like 20 something years after being like the speaker of the House? It's like, maybe. I don't know what's in another person's head nor heart, but all I know is he had come out with a book and his campaign check to the state of Arizona for $500 bounced. So you go from like, okay, I am absolutely serious. Like a lot of folks like didn't necessarily think President Trump was serious. Oh, he's not going to do this. He's not going to do this. It's like, okay, from a business perspective, if I'm looking at this at then time candidate Trump, what's the win loss? If you run for president, what do you get? You get ad time. You get like publicity and stuff like that. And you can say, oh, I ran for president, so you'd be former presidential candidate. So it does give an air of like legitimacy and stuff to it. So I think that at that time, candidate Trump was like, I'm going to try this. I'm going to see what happens. He was going along, and I think he probably budgeted out about $100 million of his own money that he was going to, of course, loan his campaign, of course, because then he can actually be repaid that money, which is he absolutely can right now because he raised over $300 million so far for his re-election campaign. But I'm looking at this and I'm like, okay, he did that, and at one point where it's like, oh, he's might lose or something like that, and I remember there was a CNN reporter, and she was like, it's like, oh, don't, Mr. Trump, are you going to loan your campaign more money? It's kind of brushing her off. He's like, well, we'll see, and then all of a sudden, Jim Comey reopened the Secretary Clinton email investigation due to, I believe it was. Was it her? Oh, what was her assistant's name? Uma. There, and her husband, Mr. Weiner. So, essentially, in some ways, it seems like Secretary Clinton got screwed by a dick. But oh god, that sounded terrible. But no, that's the thing. It's like, are you really okay? If you're gonna be sexting with a 15-year-old girl on an Apple computer that your wife also uses for her work for the government, it auto uploads and updates, so those files would be mirrored. It's poor choices. Hey, we all make them, but these things happen.
Well, I mean, just doing that with a 15-year-old girl alone is poor choices.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there were so many things that went wrong, so many terrible. You can absolutely argue, like, even treading on absolutely illegal and morally reprehensible. Yes. But the thing is, it's like, at this point, it's like, if all we're seeing is Donald Trump, the sheer fact that all we see is basically Donald Trump nonstop, that, like you said, people look up Democratic people. If that's what returns, and you just see Donald Trump smiling back, it's you've broken the internet. You've broken the internet.
I honestly think that's fucking hilarious, to be honest.
No, as soon as you said, I'm like, okay, I'm just starting the stream now, just because this is the problem. This is the problem, and it's like, we don't need to do this. Try to give a better message. Why? It's do what candidate Trump did. Be like, just pick a few things. It's like, okay, what are we going to focus on? How about just something a little bit more pragmatic? How about making sure that all United States citizens have some modicum of health care coverage? It's like, oh, we're already saying that. It's like, okay, why don't you make an argument that you can actually truly get that through? Because you're still going to have to get it through the Republican side. Dude, all I know is within the Constitution of these United States, man, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, at least 2, if not 3 of those things are pretty strong arguments for a form of universal health care. You pick the economy.
Okay. I'm going to have to stop you.
Okay.
All right. England, with England's universal health care, what's the population of the UK?
Oh, like 80 million.
What's the population of Canada?
Like 30 or so million?
What's the population of the United States?
Like 350 million or so.
Okay, you see how it won't work for us?
Why? Why not?
A smaller, like you were saying, 80 million. Yeah, that could work. 30 million. Yeah, it could definitely work. Over here, we're over 300 million. It's gonna be pretty fucking dicey.
Well,
Now,
go on.
personally don't agree with how the insurance programs are working, how the medical book is being thrown at us to where if the doctor decides to have to open up, let's say you're stabbed and the doctor has to open up a box of gloves and they take like just two pairs of fucking of 100 gloves out and they're using those two pairs, well, you just bought that entire box. Or for a little bit of salt water, it costs like $40. No, no, we should actually cut back the prices of those because the prices of making them hasn't changed since the 40s. So it's not necessarily the universal health care, it's the inflation of the pharmaceutical industry and how they're creating a profit out of it. Much in the same way for the medication for AIDS was monopolized and then sold in an extremely high fashion.
Oh, and we have a loafer joining us in the chat as well. But Vash, just to push back a bit on kind of what you were saying there. So I just kind of brought up, okay, so the UK, and again, this is according to the Googles. So in the UK, the GDP is approximately $2.6 trillion. Canada is about 1.6 trillion, round up to 1.7. The US is 19.39 trillion. So if I'm just going by this, and according within the chat there, I've been corrected. The UK, according to Loafer, has about 68 million folks over there. So you figure, okay, times that times five. Okay, so times five of 2.62 trillion dollars. In theory, you could do it, but again, we must also factor in that the United Kingdom. They do also have a VAT tax, and ultimately, that that's how Andrew Yang proposes paying for the freedom dividend. I am skeptical of new taxes because of the potential reduction, especially if it's going to be like a new core tax and that. I mean, the real thing is if you're going, the big thing that gets me is I see like Senator Sanders and Senator Warren. Senator Sanders is, yes, taxes will go up, and Senator Warren's kind of like trying to get around that, doing the old political thing. It's like, dude, just you could do this with a picture. Just be like, okay, here's your paycheck. All right, you see this over here? See where it says like Medicare that you already pay for? This part goes up. You see this part that says premium? This goes away. Bada boom, bada bing. Like, that's how you explain it to people. You don't need to overcomplicate it. If you're going to levy a tax, say it. That's the thing, because people now have the internet and stuff. So it's like, if you're gonna do something, people will go after you, especially if you don't admit to it. That's the
Well, I
thing.
mean, the other thing about Canadian healthcare is there are more specialists than there are general physicians. Did you know that?
I mean that is very interesting. I do tend to think we have that same thing over here because it tends to be higher paying, and that's ultimately when you look at the healthcare system. I think the reason for a lot of those costs, like that extremely expensive like
So,
box
like,
of gloves, and
we have more general physicians than we do specialists.
do do we? Because I always hear we need more general practitioners because it is more incentivized to go into certain things. I just even remember from
I
house and
mean, I
stuff.
mean, in comparison to Canada's area.
Oh, I mean, yeah, more as a ratio Or because I would assume we'd have more in general
I,
because
I
our
would say
population's
I would
over
say
10 times.
as a ratio, yes. I mean, I've spoke to a couple of Canadians about their healthcare system.
Well, I mean, and again, the UK and Canada, I mean, they do have a bit of a hybridized system as well. It's not necessarily just this is the one size fits all. I know over in Canada, what happens is if all of a sudden, if you go in and then you might have to wait for something or whatnot. I was speaking to a gentleman who actually is from I believe, the greater Montreal area earlier this year. And when he says, oh, you pay $400, you go to the clinic and everything, and you just, then all of a sudden you're within a prioritized queue. But then again, that's also, you have to pay $400, which him as somebody that worked as a successful builder for many years, he he has the means to do that. So now you have a potential barrier to entry within that system, as well as the UK. I remember there was a discussion I had with Cabby back in the day where he says like, yes, you can absolutely use like the provided healthcare within the UK. You can absolutely do that. However, you can also purchase a private plan as well. So basically, what ends up happening is now you have the money that would normally be taken out of your contribution towards the healthcare system. It then goes actually towards your premium. So the way he had explained it actually made a lot of sense to me. So you at least had a choice. However, if you were in like a rough spot or something, you're not working or something, you didn't necessarily have to worry about, oh my God, I'm going to lose my health care. Lisa's not going to be able to get braces. And it ends up going into one of those things there. And it's like, yeah, I use the Simpsons example just for comedic effect, but it's like one of Senator Sanders, like first ads I saw on YouTube is basically a mom going up there saying that basically, yeah, they were going to be losing their insurance and everything. They weren't going to be able to get meds for their sick kid and stuff. And it's just anybody that puts themselves in those shoes. I mean, we have compassion. And then again, I have heard MC yell at me for a number of times and say that a lot of this could be done with private charity. And just from a business standpoint, if you can remove the number of layers and number of folks that are needed to in order to get every single dollar that is spent towards healthcare, actual care to that person itself, basically paying the wages of doctors for the equipment and everything. Because I think so much of the cost right now is okay, if you're getting billed $60 for two aspirin, why the heck are you getting billed $60 for two aspirin? Are those
Well, I mean,
magical hospital aspirin that just no? It's the thing is like we have it so complicated with insurance because it's like okay, my plan may pay this amount, your plan may pay that amount, another person's plan may be this amount. So they're just slicing and dicing it, just trying to maximize their actual revenue as well because the system, there's so much uncertainty there. And I think if you could remove a certain amount of that uncertainty just from a financial function perspective, that normalizes things because it ends up being, because basically, let's say, like the whole penny stock thing. So you think you throw a couple bucks towards a penny stock. Why is it only a penny? Well, because basically you have no idea. It's incredibly risky. Whereas if you want to purchase like a share of like a Google or a General Electric or whoever it might be, it's like we know those names. It's like we know that pretty much no matter what happens, basically no matter what happens, they're going to have billions and billions of dollars coming in because they have so much established business. You pay a lot more than that penny stock. So I think if we could remove a lot of this risk and then on the other end focus on like actual wellness programs, because that's the big thing. If you can prevent to the point where it actually becomes catastrophic and it ends up costing hundreds of thousands of dollars to deal with a treatment, if you can nip that in the bud by just incentivizing and be like, okay, guess what? Okay, yeah, you're going to have this tax or something like that, but guess what? You go to the gym 3 days a week. We have ways to verify that. I used to work within the fitness industry, man, and we'd have folks come in and just be, oh, could you print out my logins and stuff like that? Yeah. Why were they doing that? Because they would submit to their insurance company, and then they would get cash back. Some folks would pay 100, 200, 300, like 350 or more dollars now, and these companies, they're realizing that because if you have folks actively doing something to stay in better shape, it's like maintenance on a vehicle, except it's your body, man. You only got one. You smash your car, you can always get a new car, but all of a sudden, like, you wreck yourself. You only got one life to live. I was trying to include as many punny examples as I could, but I don't know. Does this make any sense?
But at the same time, there are people that are using a charity type of thing. And personally, I would agree to that. I have funded quite a few people whenever I was having my factory job before my back gave out, and I'm currently working to help people who are disabled, um, which I'm honored to be able to actually, uh, because I'm able to people that they like some of them got into car accidents, and they're not really the same, and there's actually a lot of people that I enjoy talking to like that. But it's now we see people in GoFundMe
Hmm.
using GoFundMe to have people fund their healthcare, and it's I also do agree with Tim Tarbox on in the chat right now about the government. How can we trust the government managing healthcare in the U.S. whenever they can't even manage the VAs? You
That's
know,
that's an incredibly attuned point, and that's one of those things there. Just because if you look at what's going on, and you have to look at the incentive structure and what's going on. So what do I see going on here? Basically, your example right there, just the sheer fact of a GoFundMe, kind of that would be my pitch for something like that. Because at one point, while MC was yelling at me, he used a certain phrase, and I'm like, MC, how do you think like private charity and stuff could work? Like, what about those folks? Like, what makes you think that can work? And he's like, because I think most folks are good people. And I go, ooh, I use those words. And if I'm going to use those words and they get used against me, it gives me pause. So I pause, and just that exact example right there, because I think I may have told you the story before, Vash, about how I had attempted to do a $6,200 Kickstarter to send every member of the British House of Commons a copy of 1984, along with like a little note, as well as a Area 1 DVD, because I realized they're very busy, but since it was a US based DVD, it may not work in their DVD players. But basically, it was a troll. It was a troll to be like, there seem to be some authoritarian things going on here, and yeah, you might. Basically, long story short, Kickstarter, they denied me. I appealed it. They denied it again. Again, it was skirting the line. I get that. That's fine. And then I was going to go over to GoFundMe. So as soon as I go to GoFundMe to set up my troll, I look at the front page and I saw exactly what you described there, man. I saw so many folks that are in hard times, very often medical issues, that were reaching out looking for folks that would be willing to help them. And it's at that point I realized
I'm not
how the heck can I ask money to troll the United Kingdom House of Commons when there are folks here that need money? And that's what actually kind of gives me faith there, because what I would pitch is, rather than like democratic socialism or being a social democrat, my push would be, dude, use democratic capitalism. What the heck is democratic capitalism? It's that right there. It's Patreon. It's folks within communities helping individuals within communities. We have the ability to do that right now, because you remember, like back in the day, we'd have the your $1 a day can like help these kids over here, and they'd have like an individual child that would write to you, because that makes it personal. It goes to a single person. You can actually view and see
well,
the help.
the whole thing about it is I see it more as like I personally don't really agree in socialism.
Hmm.
In capitalism, there's always someone that's going to make a profit,
It's also the
which
incentive too. That's the big thing, because it does
yeah,
spur
yeah. I
innovation.
mean, I'm not knocking that, but there it is true. Like my form of socialism was the time that I was in high school, and I didn't necessarily have much money, like at all. I was able to pay my rent, but that was roughly it. And I remember there were times where my community that I was in. Now, granted, I was one out of like six white dudes that were there. Like, that was it. That was all the white guys that were in my community at the moment at the time. And I like there was a time where we all came together and we were like, "Hey, what have you got?" Well, I got some, beef broth. What about you? Well, I got a couple of cube steaks. All right. Well, another guy chimes in. I got an onion and some carrots. And we all band together and we made a hell of a fucking stew. And I think that's what a lot of humanity's forgetting is, the power of coming together versus just living on your own and keeping your pride.
That's ultimately one of the things, and it's like some folks, they don't, when they need help, they don't always ask. Because I'll be straight up. I had a friend. She works as a bartender, and like she was been like the same place for like 14, 13 years, single mom, raising their two kids and everything, busting her butt. I'm like, you do realize you probably qualify for like housing assistance and stuff. She's like, no, I can do this on my own. And it's like, then bar ended up getting bought out. She ended up getting let go and everything, and then she had to move. And you just look at that, and like, there's some folks that don't want to. Um, I really do think a lot of transparency comes down to this. The reason why I say this because I did also at one point have an individual as a roommate who was working at the time, was actually doing decently well for himself, is pretty good at his job, doing sales, and long story short, he ended up becoming incarcerated. And after he kind of disappeared, I noticed, oh, look at that, oh, an unemployment benefits check. I'm like, oh, so he's getting his snap cards, and he was buying his butts and stuff with it, which you're not supposed to do, but I guess people would do it, as well as yeah, okay, he's also getting all these benefits and collecting and basically committing fraud on the system. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that's not cool, and that's what ends up turning a lot of folks off because I don't really think there's been many conservatives, maybe occasionally a libertarian, but there aren't many folks out there saying it's like, yeah, the old grandmother down the street that's basically alone by herself. Yeah, we don't want to help her out. Like if someone's truly in need and they're down, their luck, folks are willing to help out. It's just if folks feel like their goodwill is being taken advantage of, people don't take kindly to that, and that ends up, I think, elevating into the point where it's like, well, just screw all these people, and it's like, yeah, yeah, no, I get what you're saying, but it's like I try to put myself in the other person's shoes, and actually, that's not even the best example. What I'd say is spend the night in another person's bed. What do I mean by that?
I mean, I'll go ahead and
Yeah.
say there was a time where I was homeless,
Hmm.
and I'll go ahead and tell as to how I got that way. It wasn't laziness. It wasn't, I jumped into a bunch of drugs or anything. What happened was I had a job, and at the time I was living above a bar,
Hmm.
and these were some rowdy people, and I had gotten a job at an ice cream factory. It was up in New York, Western New York. So it was looking on the up and up at working there. The people that I was working around liked me. So I chose to make a jump to move to the town that I was working at because I was tired of, having carpool trips there and back and having to pay like somewhere around $30 to $40 for gas. So I figured, all right, I'm going to go there. The moment that I used the rest of that money to move in to another area was the week that they chose to fire me. And the thing about that is New York State, the way that it works is in order to have a house, you have to have a job. In order to have a job, you have to have an address.
So a
So
perfect storm of
I could not have an address, and thus I could not have a job.
yeah, that's rough, man. No, it's just, and I go
So,
back to, no, I finish up.
what I decided to do was I took a tent. I used the rest of my money that I had to grab a tent, and I bought everything that I needed to buy for that tent, and I sold everything else. And I went out into the woods behind us it was a water filtration plant that there was a patch of woods behind that, and I stayed there for almost a year. And I found a pizza place that had a help wanted sign. And I'd noticed some people that I had met in the soup kitchen were around working for them. And I walked up and I said, "Hey, who's in charge here?" And an Italian guy came up. You know, he wasn't, he was kind of a stocky businessman kind of guy. And he looked at me. I said, I noticed your sign. And he said, "Yeah. Well, can you fill out this paperwork?" I said, "Sir, I'll be completely crystal clear with you. I don't have an address." And he said, "Ah, all right. Where do you stay?" I said, "I'll be honest, sir. I live out of a tent." He said, "Come by around this time. I'll help you out." And I went, toured around with him, and I actually got around 2 to 3 grand, and I was able to move back down to Arkansas.
That's amazing. And that's the big thing, man. It's like, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I wasn't there or anything, but you're just sheer brutal honesty. Like, a lot of times it seems like folks aren't used to that. They're so used to just, well, this is what I'm supposed to say because of this, and I'm going to avoid saying this because, well, this is this. I'm just going to try to make an excuse. You're just straight up. It's like, I'm living in a tent. This is the situation, and just that has an impact on people, especially if it's a smaller run business. Because unfortunately, a lot of times, if you're a very large business, you have all these different regulations and stuff. Which, I mean, that's another issue in and of itself, right there. But my big thing is, I still remember when XX Mrs. Memes at one point in her life, she was homeless. She was staying within a shelter and stuff, and she would tell me, like, her and some of the gals and stuff, like, they would do that exact same thing. And like, that was one of the best things that she ever made was slop. What did you do? What was slop? It was whatever you had and you made that was good and stuff. In our case, like, we had the benefit of, a lot of times it's like, all right, we're gonna take some French fries, we're gonna have some cheese, and we're gonna cover it with all lots of other ooey gooey stuff. So you're making almost like an Irish nachos there. So, and I mean, I love that stuff. Oh, I got so many pictures and everything. It was so good. Oh, she was a good one.
Well, I mean, the whole thing about it was just basically um like I helped out in the soup kitchens a little bit, but I wouldn't go to the shelters. I would actually help other people get to the shelters, and then I would take my leave, like, and I'd just go back to my tent.
Well, that was the thing. You were helping people out, and I mean, I don't really believe you're really much of a religious Dargun or anything. I mean, again, I'm not going to assume what's in another person's head nor heart, but it's as somebody that at least kind of believes in karma, I think that was like somebody may have been looking out for you. I don't know. Call it cosmic force of the universe, refer to it as whom or whatever you want. I mean, I just think there's something to that. And even if that weren't the case, even if you just want to go from a strictly secular perspective, the sheer fact if you're going out there and doing something good, doing something for another human being, helping our fellow creature, I do think there is something to that that just kind of brings a wholesomeness that at least will increase your chances, because if you have a more positive view, I mean, positivity radiates. I mean, let's face it, like we've all had friends that like they can kind of get into like a mood or something, and it's like, oh, you don't want to be around Jerry right now. He's in one of those moods and everything, and like people tend to avoid that. Whereas it's like, oh Vash is having a good old time. It's like frickin' he may be homeless. He may literally be under a bridge right now, but he's chilling with a person, having a solid conversation, and they're sharing something, whether it's frickin' a bottle, a pipe, whatever it is, or just even watching a campfire or something, man. Just something that's common between human beings that you can just focus on and just treat people like human beings.
Yeah, I mean there were a couple of pretty cool stories, like how I met one of the guys that I personally called him Uncle Jack because he was a hell of a dude. He was a biker. Um, Lived under a bridge, Vietnam vet, kick you in the teeth just as much as shaking your hand, and he was my drinking buddy. Um, Sadly, he's last I heard, he's no longer around.
I'm sorry.
Lung cancer. He had already suffered from lung cancer while I was around him,
Hmm.
and we would share beers. We would smoke out of his tobacco pipe. He was an awesome dude. Um, he was also homeless at the time, and yeah, it was all right. Like there were a lot of people that I got to meet there, and I don't look at it as a negative part because being from Arkansas, I knew how to survive off the land. Like I killed my own game and fucking gutted it and put it over the fire. But it was an alright area. I had a group around me that were pretty pretty decent people. We were all in bad straits, but we all stuck together.
Well, that's one of the big things, man. It's just I think a lot of times we're at our best when we're at our worst. Basically, people are at their best when times are at their worst. It's probably a better way to say it, just because I don't care where it is, man. I don't care whether it's San Francisco, Mexico City, or Tehran. If you see an earthquake, which I believe all those three cities have had major earthquakes, I've seen the exact same thing. People helping people, like people just moving rubble and stuff like that to save human beings. Why? I just say because it's good. It's one of those things, and it's like, no, is everybody going to necessarily be able to move like part of a concrete building off somebody? No, but you know what? There are some folks that are going to try to do it, and when folks see people start to do it, other folks are willing to help. And that's one of those things. And that's why when MC told me that most folks are good people, I do believe there's something to that. And do I have the exact answer? Absolutely not. None of us has all the answers for every single little thing. But I think together we can figure this stuff out, because if you just even look within, like, even just this little corner of the internet, just this little area, the people within our valence of just standard interactions and stuff like that, we see all the bickering, we see all the hatred and stuff like that. We see people going after people for this, that, and the other thing, past transgressions, what they may have misinterpreted or something like that. It's like, okay, no, you have the freedom to do that, but what are we accomplishing? Yeah, maybe we get some lulls. I call it the principle of keck keck lulls. It's like, all right, how much laughter are we getting for the internet fucketry there? So it's like, what's the balance? And people apparently seem to kind of prefer to do that. I don't think that's most folks on the whole, because I think folks want to have meaning to it. And if the current meaning is just destroying the other, that doesn't seem all that good. And I think that if we actually, like, if we could literally clear out the cachet of hatred from our heads and hearts, like, if we could do that, and all of a sudden we had the talent and everything that's out there, rather than going at each other, that's the big thing. At that point, we can all kind of just look up and say, hi, we'd like to do things that are useful. Use help us? Yes? And that's the thing, dude. Like, ultimately, I had a discussion within a Discord server about this the other day. It's like, it just imagine what we could do if all the people on the internet just stopped hating each other. Like, if we stopped going after each other, what could happen? Folks are like, well, that would never happen. I'm like, you know what we could do if that happened? I think we could actually do the whole theory of the true communism. The whole, if folks actually got over themselves, got over that extra bit of like excessive pride. There's nothing wrong with having pride in yourself and everything. No, that is an important thing. But when you put your pride just above everything else, in that you can never even admit you make a mistake, come on now. Like, people see through that. Maybe you'd be able to get back in that if you were just traveling around as the king from town to town here and there. It's like, dude, man, we got the internet now. People are going to figure this stuff out, and that's why I generally present myself as a half Jewish dragonkin on the internet, and a terrible person. Set the bar low. So, but Vash, yeah, we've been going for a little over an hour now. Any final thoughts on this general dynamic of how the Democrats could actually win?
If they stop pointing fingers at each other and they actually come to a consensus of not having their knives pointed at each other's throats, they might have a chance. But I doubt that's going to happen.
Okay, so you're saying there's a chance?
There's always a chance.
Okay, that's fair, but I tend towards your assessment, just because this is what we keep seeing. It's just like they seem like they're just gonna kind of go after each other and everything, and it's like, I get it. No, you got a large progressive wing and stuff going on there, and a lot of folks trying to feed them and stuff. It's like, no, I get it. Why are folks being pushed in this direction? I personally think it's kind of going to do what I was talking to, like, having an argument about with Mister the Plague about, in that it's like, okay, if people are literally feeling like they're in dire straits, I mean, of course people are going to respond and stuff like that, and want to, like, have, like, if folks are saying, we're going to help you. If you need help, yeah, you're going to want that. I just think there's a better path that we can actually truly achieve, as well as avoiding potential for authoritarian means. Because I'm starting to see a lot of stuff, and I don't care what this side is, people are starting to sound a lot more authoritarian. And that's the thing that truly scares me, because as soon as we go down that path and stuff, we've seen where that path goes. So, but yeah, no, I thank you for joining me, Vash, and I know there's a Luna there somewhere that I we're going to be welcoming a little Dargun in at some point. Oh, my apologies if I'm not supposed to say that, but yeah, thank you.
No worries, no worries. Yeah, I am going to have a hatchling.
We look forward to their entering into this world. So, hey, everybody in the chat there, Loafer, Jez, Minor Way of Hope, good old Loafer, Tim Tarbox, Karin, who was popping around in there, as well as Mr. Quinn. I thank you all for joining us, and for all who may watch in the future as well. Thank you for joining us. This is the conclusion of the Double Dargan podcast.
Well, I just wanted to mention real quick. If anybody wants to talk with me, if anybody wants to message me, I'm always on my Discord. Memes could probably vouch for that.
We got you, man. I'll toss. Go on.